There's something about the combination of the Christmas story and beautiful melodies, which makes for music making which is incredibly meaningful and uplifting. And that is why I think the carol form is so enduring. My name's Alice Beckwith. I'm a composer based in Manchester, but I'm originally from West Yorkshire. I write chamber music, songs, orchestral scores and music for choirs. I am also trained as an oboist, I play the piano and I sing. I love Christmas carols. Picking out my favourites, I'm going to go for In the Bleak Midwinter, the setting by Harold Darke, and John Rutter's Star Carol. There's something about both of these, albeit very different characters, that makes you want to sing and celebrate, and they're just such inspiring pieces of music. The fact that we sing them and hear them every year, but they always leave you wanting more, I think that really is a sign of a really superb carol. And yes, they would absolutely have to be in my top 5. When a composer is looking for a carol text, I would suggest they look for 3 things. The first is the suitability of the language and the narrative to suit a Christmas story. The second is the suitability of that text for singing. And last but not least, in an ideal world, they would also feel a sense of personal connection to the text, which will inspire their setting. When I first discovered Christina Rossetti's text, Love Came Down at Christmas, I knew I wanted to set it because of the beautiful language and imagery. And I also felt that by setting it as a carol, I could share it with other people. The process of setting a Christmas text is no different to setting any other text for voices. That said, there are certain things that you might want to consider, such as if the carol is going to be sung by a congregation, the structure is often useful as a series of verses with repeated melodic lines so that the congregation can pick up the melody quickly. You might also want to include harmonic lines so that a congregational choir can sing together but enjoy further harmonic colour. Where there are existing settings of a text or a text is very well known, I tend to avoid listening to or seeking out other interpretations until I've completed my own setting. Often I'm drawn to a text because of the imagery and the language, so it's not influenced at the start or at any point by somebody else's work. I do often find it really interesting to see how different people's interpretations can be. But with Christina Rossetti's text, Love Came Down at Christmas, this has been an entirely independent project and that hasn't been based on any pre-existing settings. In terms of adapting or editing an existing text, there might be times when it suits the composer to adapt a text in order to better fit the melodic line, or when the lower harmonic parts are moving less frequently. Certainly there are times when a composer will choose to select just a few lines or a particular verse, but this all depends on context and the overall final effect. No matter what level the choir that you're writing for, there are some consistent things to bear in mind when you're writing for voices. I'd say the first and most important is that a choir needs to breathe. So allowing space for that between phrases can often be really key to making sure that your music works. Some choirs may not actually read music, so they may be learning your music orally, in which case consider how they're going to find their pitch and make references to particular harmonies and effects in your music. And thirdly, just the singability generally of your setting, bearing in mind the text and any sort of intervals which move across a vocal break. As a general rule, if you can sing it comfortably, then probably the choir will too. I have written for many different choirs, from professional singers to community choirs and children's choir. There are always differences from one ensemble to the next, even from one professional choir to another. I think there are a lot of similarities when writing for different ability choirs, but also some key differences to bear in mind. The biggest difference, whether writing for children's choir or community choir or professional choir, is vocal range. In a children's choir, you can probably expect to write within a soprano-alto range, albeit not too high or low at either end. Within a community choir, soprano, alto, baritone is probably most comfortable, but that can depend on the number of men at your disposal. And then in a professional choir, you can expect to be able to write for the full range, so high soprano and very low bass, plus anything in the middle. Other differences between those choirs can be really variable, but for example, rehearsal time and the way in which rehearsals are run can really affect how a choir engages with your music. Whether the choir read music or learn from a backing track, or in fact rely on a piano accompaniment, those are quite useful things to bear in mind. I would usually suggest to a composer that they go along and see the choir in a concert or rehearsal before they start writing. There's something about knowing who you're writing for, which is really, really helpful. But if that's not possible, then perhaps you can find recordings or sit down and just speak to the conductor or one of the singers in that ensemble so that you have a clearer picture of who you're writing for. My sketching process when I'm approaching a new piece differs every time, but typically I might begin with a structure, especially if I'm setting a text. If it's an instrumental piece, I will usually have a look at the keys that I'd like to work within, and particularly if I'm writing for choir, then thinking about pitch and range is usually quite crucial before I start writing. Once I've mapped out a very loose outline of the piece, then typically melody and harmony will follow. Usually melody taking the lead, but not always. And there are times when I find that I have a certain chord progression and then I have to find a way to fit the melody around or through that series of chords. I don't think there's really any one harmonic progression which feels carol-like to me, but there are some key melodic patterns which often involve descending and ascending scales, which I always associate with carols. For example, the first Noel, or the ending of Once in Royal David City, when we have this beautiful, beautiful resonant conclusion to the carol. And beneath that descending melodic line, we also have rising harmonic patterns. So if we hear it all together. If I'm going to be technical, I guess that's a 4-5-1 cadential pattern. But yeah, that gives you an idea. When it comes to writing satisfying refrains that choirs want to sing over and over again, I think chromatic chord progressions or sequences are always a good way to go. But really, just something that I feel good singing is usually my barometer on that. As a composer writing for voices for the first time, there were certain things that I discovered which meant that my writing wasn't as effective as it could have been. First was that I approached my writing as I would have done for an instrumental ensemble, and in fact there are certain quirks of notation which mean that for singers it might make more sense for you to write a melodic line which moves through a series of sharps, perhaps even entertaining a key signature in 6 or 7 sharps, rather than a flat alternative, which as an instrumentalist would make more sense to me. I would also say that, as a general rule, less is more, and there can be some really effective, stunning vocal pieces and vocal effects created just by blending voices in particular ways. So it's a very unique process, in fact, writing for voice, and I would encourage all composers to give it a try, leaving you with the fact that if you sing it and you find it effective, then chances are that will also translate well to your choir. I have a lot of favourite moments in Love Came Down at Christmas, but I think one of my favourite parts is the second verse, where we have the melody line supported by the alto, tenor and bass parts who are just gently oohing beneath. The carol is written in G major, and there's this lyrical flowing melody line which carries on really throughout the whole carol. It's heard a lot in the piano part. But suddenly in verse 2, whilst we start in G major, we then find ourselves in B flat major midway through, and it's just a really special moment of colour which enabled me to explore quite a lot of fun different harmonic chords. I'm going to play you from the start of the verse. I'll play you the whole of verse 2. etc. And we're back into the piano interlude before verse 3. I was really pleased to revisit this carol and create extra layers for this new arrangement for children's choir and SATB. I found that I didn't need to make any fundamental changes to the structure or harmony, which is usually only a good thing. As a composer, learning to trust your performers is probably one of the most important things you can do. It means that you give them confidence to bring your score to life, more or less as you imagine it, but with something extra that honestly can't be conveyed through a paper score. So yes, my works do tend to sound as I imagined them, but also no, because there's always something extra, this special, magical element that only the performers can bring to my music. And I think probably all composers have experienced that. For me, the emotional power of a carol is found somewhere in the fact that the whole is so much greater than the sum of its parts. It's difficult to put my finger on, but I think the Christmas story, which is humbling and inspiring and accompanied by singing and beautiful melodies, it just cannot fail to have this emotional power and significance for anyone who hears or performs it. If you're thinking about writing your first carol, the best advice I can give you is just start. Sit down at the piano or your desk or wherever you write and handwrite the carol text first of all. Sit with it as long as you need. Let the feeling and the narrative be really instilled in you so that you have a sense of structure and the direction you want the carol to take. And then write. Get to the piano, pick up your instrument, however it is you do it, sing it and hum it to yourself and put pen to paper or pencil, in my case, useful in case you change your mind, and just make a start. Good luck.